I am back with a new microphone, and a new computer.
Hey.
That's true, and a new computer.
A whole new man.
I don't know how important this is to anyone, but I just found out that Apple makes their own processors, which is news.
Yeah, I don't understand how. I guess Pills has been living under a rock. I mean, maybe he doesn't. I just assumed that you'd be keeping up with tech.
Not Apple. I would never buy an Apple.
Okay, so you don't pay attention.
I had an iPhone one time, would never go back.
Yeah, they ditched Intel like 4 years ago, and it's good riddance.
I do keep up on the other side of the tech, graphics cards and the like.
I always thought they used like Foxconn in China.
Oh, well, I mean, that's different. That's like a manufacturer as opposed to like a designer, right? So, but I don't even think, I think all the chip manufacturers are Taiwanese, like TMCS or something like that. But then the assembly plants are like Foxconn, which like assemble the prefabricated electronics. Anyway.
Yeah, David Harvey's always going on about Foxconn.
Do we have anything theoretical to say about that, or should we move to the theory stuff?
Let's just, I mean, I don't know. I've always thought that like there's something philosophical about the like the Apple mindset versus the like PC mindset, that it's like people think they want freedom, like to customize, but actually like then they find that there's a company that's kind of dictatorial and just like makes everything in one package. It's just better.
I mean,
I disagree entirely.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
you've never even used a Mac for like your life, your like everyday life.
When I worked in a graphic design firm in industry, and they only had.
Oh, they only use Mac. Oh, yeah, true.
I know all the Adobe shortcuts on both Mac and PC.
Well, theoretically, I'm sure we are going to mention totems eventually at some point. And what other popular totems are there than either, Apple, iPhone, or Android, Mac
exactly.
computers or PC, those are totems, right? And people are fiercely on one side or the other. There's nobody who's like, I like to go back and forth.
That is a killer reference, Eric. Killer segue. The annoying Apple fanboy, I don't know if they're still around, but they definitely were at one point. And for them, it's not enough just to use an Apple product. You also have to worship the totem itself, the Apple logo, and fully commit to the rest of the cult, along with its sacred figure, Steve Jobs. RIP.
Yeah.
Now, there's no reason you couldn't, in our use of the term today, that could be considered a light cult. And what's our use today? We're starting something new, a new line of thought, fresh stuff. You don't have to have heard any of the previous episodes. You're getting in on the ground floor. I wanted to go back over some sociology, because there was a point at which sociology and philosophy were considered the same thing, and then it disciplinarily drew the lines for itself. And I wanted to investigate why it's quite easy for us to say that the masses are irrational, that the masses are easily deceived, particularly in an election year. But the discipline of sociology was consciously invented in order to explain why the masses do what they do. And the answer is, no surprise, religion. Not any one religion. Culture is secularized, blah, blah, blah. However, secularization, according to these guys, has had zero effect on either the structure of knowledge itself or the structure of belief in the modern world. So we continue to behave in a religious manner, despite the fact that there are no gods anymore. That is, if these 20th century French sociologists are to be believed. So with that intro now spieled, how much of this have you guys looked at previously? I admit it was a bit of a selfish pick for me, because a lot of this was on my general comp exams list.
Yeah, I never read any of this
stuff. I did not know
stuff.
that. No, I thought it would be important for poli-sci too.
Durkheim does not really come up much. Weber does a lot.
Yeah, I know, but like it was, I guess it was a little bit indistinct. This is when it's being like institutionalized and like sociology, anthropology, political science, they're all kind of coming apart. Like, political economy is separating into politics and economics.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are like political scientists who talk about Durkheim. It's just, I wouldn't say it's essential the way that like Weber, I would say Weber comes up a lot. And Durkheim would maybe be like, oh, you're bringing in some Durkheim. Cool. Like, but it wouldn't be weird, but it wouldn't be expected.
Yeah, I might ask you about that, but I didn't really see how Durkheim would be immediately relevant to politics, except maybe now since it's so fucking religious, but it hasn't always been.
Yeah, it's interesting that their reading list is like Kant and Hume, and they're sociologists, whereas we associate them with completely separate disciplines. But when he's justifying creating a discipline, the one we now call sociology, his references are Kant, just like in philosophy. But if you want an example of public religion and public ritual and public symbol, we have the Olympics. I don't think we're going to talk about this very much because none of us have watched any Olympic game, have we?
No, I don't care about it at all. It's kind of funny. My dad like sent me a text and was like, hey, a crazy Olympics intro, eh? And I was like, the Olympics are on? Like, I didn't even know it was on. I was like, that's how little I care. And then I also saw kind of a funny video, or well, the video itself wasn't funny, but it's kind of like a funny turn of events that apparently now, I don't know if you guys remember how the Olympics used to be this like thing that cities would fight over getting. Yeah. And now it's actually such a struggle to get a city to agree to it because like all the things that the Olympics promise about how it's going to be boost to your economy, like all the empirical studies have shown that none of those things are true, that it's actually just like a huge waste of money for your city, that like the economic and like a bunch of cities that have had the Olympics have the stadiums that are just sitting there like empty that they have to pay like millions of dollars a year to maintain. So now like it's like the decision just gets made behind the scenes and it's really the Olympic Committee coming to cities being like, please, could you host, as opposed to like this big prestigious competition. And I think that's why I think recently it was like Paris and I don't know, what's the next place? It's LA, I think. LA is going to be next. And they had both applied for, I think, this year. But then the Olympic Committee was like, well, why don't we just do it? How about like Paris, you do it this time, and then LA, you can do it next time. So they both won, basically, because the Olympics were like, God, if we can get a city to actually agree, we should fucking jump on it. So, because it was probably like this prestigious thing. And then I guess like the economic reality kind of like took hold and people were like, well, we don't really want to do this because it's a fucking waste of money.
Yeah. Then the economics comes in.
Yeah.
I don't know how generalizable my personal experience is, but I used to be quite excited when it came on. And now, like you, I didn't even know that it was an Olympics summer. I don't know why that is.
Part of it is that I don't have a live TV too. I don't have live TV. So, I mean,
that is probably a big... Good job, Vic. You theorized it. People don't have TVs.
Yeah, I only see it when I'm like sitting in the dentist's office and there's like news playing, and then I see something about like the Canadian women's soccer team. Someone on there was caught spying with a drone, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I know something that's happening.
Oh yeah,
Or I go to my gym class. I'm like, where is everybody? Oh, they're probably watching the Olympics. Oh, so the Olympics are on. Cool.
I love it when like telemarketers from Rogers or Bell call me. And they like try to convince me to buy a TV. It's just like, they're just like, don't you care about this? And I'm like,
I got that yesterday.
They're like, don't you want to like, don't you watch? I was like, no, I don't want to watch sports.
Yeah.
I'm like, and
what
if I
TV
need to,
shows
I can
do
find.
You watch?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. It's all downloaded. It's just like the argument for having live TV just seems so bad. Like who?
Like, what are your favorite channels? Where do you get your television? I'm like, my computer. I don't want to tell you where I get my television shows.
You get to pay $60 a month to see ads.
Yeah, it's so bad. The value proposition.
I can't stand them.
And it's really only people who watch sports. Like I get it. Like I have some friends who are rabid sports fans. Like I get it. If you're a rabid sports fan, I guess. But even then, I think, aren't there like streaming services for that? Like you can just like buy like just the sports package or something. I don't know.
You're asking the wrong person.
Yeah.
I mean, sports and religion, modern ritual, these things are close.
Yeah, that's true.
I was noticing we're ninth currently in the medal count. Total medal count, United States is winning, but obviously. Gold medal count, China is winning. That's what's going on.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
That's cool. I can take pride.
Yeah, let's look at this medal count. Oh yeah. The Australians always do like really well in the Summer Olympics considering how small their population is.
They dominate the swimming.
Yeah.
The Dutch is kind of similar with the biking, referencing
that
our
makes sense.
Previous patron episode.
Yeah.
The biking.
By the way, did you know that like I was looking at listen notes of our podcast? Do you know that like
No, really?
That's what it said on listen notes.
Oh,
I think they're like
sick.
5.6% of our listeners are Dutch, apparently.
Because they all know what is first, like America, then Britain.
America, Britain. I think the Dutch are ahead of Canada. Surprisingly, I think Canada's like 4% of our listeners.
That is
Our
the
local
Netherlands has a
country.
smaller population than our country too.
I know, and that's the fascinating thing about that was like I kind of compared it. I looked at some of our, whatever we would consider our competitors who will remain nameless, to like look at the population breakdown, and like we were the only one who had this like freakishly large population of Dutch listeners. Like, why is that?
Maybe it's because the Dutch natively are quite terrible at philosophy, and we're also bad at philosophy. They're a practical people. They don't want all this esoteric metaphysics shit. They just want to know how this is going to work out in the everyday. And that's what our podcast is about. Not the arcane validity of ideas, just the practical view of what philosophy can do and what it can't. And yeah, I know you're going to say, what about Spinoza? Okay. They had to import him. They just wanted to stick it to the Spanish or wherever they got him from.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's since I know that there's so many
half our Dutch listenership, man.
Well,
Come
who
on.
else is Dutch? All the Dutch intellectuals cared about was Christianity and Calvinism. You got Erasmus, yeah.
Maybe
But the rest of them, they just wanted to argue about predestination and do capitalism on the side.
I mean, for our Dutch listeners, you who may not be patrons, on the last patron episode, I really gushed about you guys. I was there recently in Amsterdam and I loved it. So,
oh yeah, that probably
really
picked
impressed
up
me.
us a few listeners.
Well, I mean, but that was a patron episode, so like probably not like that many. Most of them didn't even hear me say that.
Maybe we just need more Canadian references, like maple syrup, beaver, TTC. All right, there we go. That should.
But why? I'd love to know, Dutch listeners, why did you choose us over other ones? What is it about us that appeals to you?
Maybe it's because I'm Dutch.
But how do they know that?
Yeah, maybe.
They figure it out? Did they find out?
It's a kindred psychic bond, They can tell I'm a real salt of the earth kind of guy.
They could sense it. They could sense it.
They see your blondness on YouTube.
Yeah, it's the blue eyes, the stubbornness, the latent hatred of the Germans.
Yeah, maybe.
Could be. I mean, I thought that was definitely a thought that came to my mind, but I was like, your name has not been publicly out there, so they wouldn't be able to tell. They shouldn't be able to tell.
Well, shout out to the Dutch brothers, the Broederien. Hup Holland Hup.
Van Pils.
I am a quarter Frisian also. I'm sure no one in Friesland listens to this podcast, but my pocket is from Friesland also.
I have British background, and that's one of our big listenerships. Maybe they figured that. I don't think I've ever mentioned that, but maybe that's it too.
Why don't we go back to sports, just because I can segue from sports to Durkheim, and we're kind of introducing sociology today, but I'm not sure how well we're going to do that. Durkheim assumes or breaks down basically all structures of knowledge, including philosophy, and says the original thing is a religious distinction. The religious distinction is between the sacred and the profane. So I was trying to figure out, what can I think of that we still do this with? And there's a lot of examples, but the sports example is that there's a barrier between the crowd and the field, especially if you go to like a professional game, but even if you don't. And there is a physical barrier that doesn't allow you to cross it, except for a certain class of people. And that class is streakers.
Streakers. Oh, I knew you were going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a place for streakers. Like, you're allowed to streak, but you also know you're going to be punished for it. But this is kind of the introductory metaphor of the distinction between the sacred and the profane, because even if you didn't have a fence, even if you didn't have a barrier there, people would not cross it. It's like a mental barrier that exists that says this part of the room that you're in, or a baseball field, basketball stadium, this part is sacred and it's not for you. And of course, physically, there's nothing stopping you from walking onto the field. Like a kid will walk on because they haven't been incorporated into the society. A dog might run on because they haven't been incorporated into society. But everyone else, even if it's a kid's soccer game and the kids are older than like 3, you know that the field is a sacred space and you can't just go on there willy-nilly. However, this rule is broken if you just won a championship or something. And then everyone knows, oh, they just won. We're allowed to, the ritual has ended, and now we're all allowed to run onto the field, run onto the court, and elevate our heroes, our figures who have just won the championship. But we know that until that final whistle blows, this is considered a sacred space relative to the profane space of sitting in the crowd and drinking your beer and eating your hot dogs.
Isn't there another ritual of like running onto the field and kissing your favorite player or something? Or am I imagining things?
Again, this is the wrong group to ask about that.
I saw it in one of my favorite TV shows, so I'm just assuming that it's accurate.
Yeah.
There's also like where it's broken in hockey games, you know, when you throw an octopus or you throw a fish over the glass. So there's ritualistic breakings to the ritual space, but you can't just do any, like no one just chucks beer onto the ice. That's not part of the ritual.
Oh, that would be barbaric.
There's one of the hockey teams, I can't remember which one it is, but one of the ads for the hockey game was the security guard is patting him down outside and finds that he's hiding a fish and just lets him go through because it's part of this team's ritual to throw the
octopus, right? Isn't it?
I'm not sure. I think there's two separate teams. One's a fish, one's an octopus.
I want to say Detroit might be an octopus.
These are the sort of fun things to take out of context too. Like imagine trying to go into a club with like a fish in your pants or something like that. It would be very strange.
Yes, it is the Detroit Red Wings.
Okay, that's the octopus, right?
That's the octopus one.
The other one is the catfish from Nashville.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Nashville Predators, you throw a catfish. So the ad I saw, the security guard knows that he has the catfish strapped to his stomach and lets him in anyway. So everything we're talking about here, this is all religion, according to Durkheim. So Durkheim's really standing in opposition to another a Weberian analysis, Max Weber, the other founder of sociology, saying that we're on a secularization course. Things are becoming rationalized, whereas Durkheim thinks that no, we are just as religious now as we always have been. We just don't have the same kinds of gods, but we have exactly the same kinds of rituals. And the Olympics is a good example of that.
Yeah, so modern institutions are things he's talking about, right? Like sports, soccer, modern institution, right? So they have a religious character, just like the explicitly religious institutions. These sort of things we normally think of as secular, he thinks of as kind of at base religious.
I also got the sense that there's an attempt to also point to a difference between, I don't know how in depth you're planning Pills on getting into sort of the concepts, because there's that whole thing between the sacred and the profane, right? And he's like, it does seem like there's some effort to make a distinction between like a religion proper, but then on the other hand, he still thinks that like any effort to bring together human beings into like some kind of social interconnected, like has some sort of religious desire at its base. At least that's kind of how I understood it.
Yeah, religion is society's reflection of itself.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's puzzling over what unifies a society.
Maybe we can step back a little bit. And that's the question what Eric just said is we are trying to figure out what unifies society.
What's the glue that holds it all together?
Durkheim thinks he's found his answer, and his answer is religion. And it could be the religion that we have, which he calls the cult of the individual, or it could be a religion that has a name like Christianity, Islam.
Well, because the earlier political economists didn't think that way. They thought about individualism, atomistic individualism. He doesn't like that explanation.
No, so he's against Marx for that reason. He's against a Marxist sociology.
If that's how you understand Marx, then you're crazy.
As a newly come out of the closet Marxist, let's all celebrate that. We encourage you in your new identity.
I thought that you were always a Marxist. I don't know.
Yeah, I always felt that way.
Well, look, Eric, I know you now have to appropriate the burden of defending Marx against any perceived slight, but it is not crazy that a large percentage of Marxist analysis has in some way relegated religion to some kind of false consciousness or some kind of lie. Whereas Durkheim says the opposite here, that there is no such thing as a false religion. So yeah, there's a conflict here, and we can do a whole episode on it if you like. But just for now, when Durkheim's lining up the other methods, he's saying that no one has taken religion seriously yet, and they need to. And this is in 1910 or whenever this is from. So is that just okay? Is it okay for now?
No, I won't snipe.
Okay, sick. We'll come back to it for sure. But let's try to put a foot forward here and say, what forms a group? What forms a society? It's not geographic borders. It's not, at least in the first case, an aggregate of individuals who randomly come together out of self-interest. It's also not a material economy in the first case. It is first the production of a symbolic economy. And the symbolic economy is what makes us have a shared world for a community. And you can have rivals or rival clans that hate each other or even fight each other. But if a society is a society, they nevertheless have a shared set of symbols, and everyone believes in the validity of those symbols. So blah, blah, blah. We live in a time of polarization, sure. But if Durkheim's correct, that polarization is secondary to the unity, and the unity is fundamental. So in looking for current relevant examples of this, I came up with this. Is this, Piers Morgan? I did his accent very successfully. All of the Brits in our Patreon community
They loved it or what?
They said it was a perfect accent, a perfect Piers Morgan British accent.
Oh, nice. Piers Morgan.
And I'm not even going to do it for the public audience because you got to pay for that shit. If you
exactly.
If you want to hear how well I can do it.
That's premium fucking content.
But not just him and everyone else. It was like, if you're coming in here to talk about Israel, the first question is, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn October, whatever the day was, 7th, October 7th?
Yeah.
Do you condemn it, or whatever it is, January 6th? Do you condemn the violence? This is a necessary ritual, a repeated ritual. It doesn't mean anything. If you're just a random guest on a news show, what does it matter if you condemn Hamas or not, or if you condemn the kid who tried to shoot the president? Like, condemnation is an act that is absolutely void of effect, but you have to do it. Or in Durkheim's terms, if you don't do it, you become cursed. You become a pariah. Then nothing you say after that is worthy of being heard.
Well, for those reasons, it should be really easy to just say yes. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But some people seem to want to fight it, though. Like, and that's the thing that I don't understand. Like, for rhetorical reasons, I'm like, just say. I mean, I don't know the particular interview you're talking about, but I have seen these like.
I think it was the
ones.
one you brought up last time. It was Destiny.
Oh, maybe, yeah. And it's just like, I don't know. I just feel like some people get like into these contortions where like, I don't know why. Like, it's meaningless. Just say yes and move on to like the actual substantive thing you want to argue about. I don't know.
I think it's just being put in a box that maybe people don't like. If you don't say anything, you're considered to be some kind of right winger or terrorist supporter. And if you say yes, then, oh, you're a leftist now or a liberal or whatever.
You have a choice to answer this. You're free to answer either way. Do you condemn it yes, or do you condemn it no? If you don't condemn it, then you are a pariah. You're an anti-Semite, or this is how the narrative used to go. I think it's a little bit different now, but you're endorsing violence. But again, endorsing or condemning as a speech act, it's just completely void.
Isn't it like the wedding ceremony?
Oh, you're going to bring some J.L. Austin in here?
Yeah.
It does matter because it affects how the collective will view you. Because the collective, the pariah, is a necessary role for the collective to have. We need to know what will happen to us if we break the code or if we break the rules of the religion. So, in Durkheim's terms, we have like an abstract society, a complex society. But if you follow Durkheim says this is exactly the same thing as a primitive society, not allowing you to touch the idol or the hidden rock that has like a picture carved into it. It's like you spat upon the idol if you say, No, I don't fucking condemn Hamas because that's a meaningless thing to do. So if you do not condemn Hamas first, then you are not allowed to speak, because then the issue becomes, why are you betraying our communal faith? Why are you spitting upon our religion?
Yeah, I can see that. It's got the religious character underneath its sort of secular trappings.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't really have that much to add to it. I think you laid it out well there.
Well, I didn't lay it out all the way yet, because as we can see in the Speech Act, there is something being sacralized. And what's being sacralized is the individual, to whom you're never allowed to do violence in our minds. This is our particular culture. In virtually every other culture, for all time, there is certainly justified violence. Not wanton violence, usually, but revenge is legal in most cultures of most times. It's only our culture where the right of violence has been entirely turned over to the sovereign, a Hobbes thing. And the private individual is now not allowed to touch violence, or not allowed to touch another individual with violence. And Pierce Morgan then will demand, when you come into the church, that you first kneel before the altar.
Pills, I was going to ask you why this reading, or why the move to Durkheim? Like, what are you seeing him offering here that's kind of like drew your attention?
I think it's because of the election in particular, because the question that Durkheim's asking is, and he settles on an answer. Let's give the answer first. We are just as religious as any human has ever been. Mm-hmm. And we, the three of us, have said, yeah, we're leftists, we endorse social progress, and we take our position on that to be the rational one. It's reasonable to believe that. But as the stakes become clear in not just American politics, but our politics, European politics, as those stakes become clear and the realization of what politics actually is becomes clear, if it's true that our position is rational, then clearly nobody gives a shit. We have assumed that perhaps rationality is part of political interest, but that hasn't gotten us anywhere. So at least to have the correct explanatory method, I think that we have to try to understand myth, magic, and ritual, because that seems to me to be 90% of what's going on. So to understand magic and to understand ritual and to understand what motivates human behavior, which is clearly not economic self-interest, then that's why we go to the sociology of religion. And that's why I suggested this reading. Okay,
right. So for you, it's adding kind of it's a good explanatory resource for how we can think about, I guess, the failure of some left-wing politics. But then, yeah, I don't know. I mean, what comes to mind when you think about, we're just as religious as we were before? I think the reading does do a pretty good job of explaining some of that. And it's interesting because one of the things that that it made me think about was like, okay, well, because it seemed like the way that he was describing it is like the things in our society that we all value, that it's like a reflection of ourselves. But then progressivism, right, is like in a way trying to change those things, right? I mean, maybe not. Maybe there's like its own religiosity like within progressive leftist circles. But then I was just kind of wondering, like, is there something, because insofar as progressivism is trying to like unsettle and change those things, like how is it, it's just like a competing religious structure? Is that kind of like how you would think about it? Or is it, because I was just sort of thinking about how, well, what is leftism trying to do, right? Well, it is trying to kind of like overturn some of these things that society, that unify society, maybe like some kind of like individualist conception right now that's dominant in like our neoliberal capitalism. So in what way is like leftism its own kind of religion? Or is it kind of an anti-religion in the sense that it's trying to change things, but then would become a new religion if it were to win?
I would want to ask, if we are a clan and we have a totem and we share a totem even with those people that we call right wing, then what is it? What, like we do belong to the same religion in that sense. If we can identify a totem, that is.
Right. Yeah. Well,
It's even more interesting in this sort of era of polarization too.
yeah, exactly.
It seems like society is going to tear itself apart. And so it's like, but things still function. There's still one nation. I mean, when you talk America or Canada or even Europe as like a sort of international body.
Well, I can't
But
help
it's
also
still
to
a
think
thing
of,
together.
You know what's inferred in that is you say society's going to tear itself apart. That means there's something called society to begin with,
right.
which is also the question that Durkheim begins with. So if we think about totems, when Durkheim talks about totems, he's saying, okay, he's studying Aboriginal Australians, and he goes like, this is the tribe of the kangaroo. Here's what they are doing. Here's the tribe of the what's an Australian animal? A dingo. The dingo tribe. So everyone's got their tribe, and there are societies that do not, like a society is closed in the sense that it's a system that does not interact with the internal affectations of another system. But when we talk about the fucking JD Vance or 2025, even though that's not our country, this is still our society. So I'm gonna put this forward. I think that our totem, our shared totem across the Anglophone Western tradition, the civilization that is now in crisis, I think it's freedom. And freedom is a lot more abstract, which is something Durkheim predicted. It's a lot more abstract than being called like the tribe of the wolf. But our clan is freedom. And objectively, it doesn't matter how not free you are. It doesn't matter how restricted, coerced.
Yeah.
But everyone from left to right is still unified behind this clan totem of freedom.
Yeah.
And of course, obviously, not everyone or no one agrees on precisely what that means, but no one doubts that the totem is the right one. And it could be otherwise, you know? The totem could be the Führer, it could be the city of Rome, it could be a person, a Jewish political deviant crucified in Palestine 2,000 years ago. It could be the wolf. Ultimately, that's arbitrary. But except for a few deviants who we have covered recently, mostly everyone agrees that personal freedom is God.
Well, you know what? I can't help but think about what like Zizek's whole bit about the horseshoe that I think Niels Bohr saw in his room, right? Or where he's like, he's like, do you believe that? Yeah, I know. He's like, do you believe in that stuff? Like the good luck of the horseshoe? And he's like, oh no, of course not. I'm a scientist, but I just, but I heard that it works even if you don't believe it, right? And it's like, and I kind of think that in a way, maybe this totem functions where we can all be cynical, right? We can all be cynics and be like, yeah, that's all bullshit, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if you don't believe it. It still works, right? It's still doing the thing. It's still doing the work of unifying us, right? Which is kind of why I even want to connect this back to the thing that I've repeated a couple times about Canada and the monarchy and how like the US is insane because they don't have a monarchy, or like, I don't know, one of my pet theories. And I was kind of thinking to myself, yeah, this could maybe fit where it's like, yeah, of course in Canada, like none of us believe in like King Charles, but that doesn't matter. Like maybe the effect of him being this totem kind of like impacts our political culture in a way that like prevents us from investing the prime minister with all this like grandiosity, the way that America invests their president with all. Maybe that's not the same thing, but it just made me think of that like,
you just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Like I think honestly, I think we figured something out here. We have to still talk about it, but yeah, we all agree on freedom. We don't agree on the definitions. Some people just think
where it comes from and what its threats are.
Some people just think, to be free is I should be able to discuss race realism on Twitter without the woke mob.
Freedom of speech.
But the other side is like, we need to be free to discuss how capitalism should be overthrown. But freedom is an untouchable object. It's a symbol that like no one in practice disagree with. And like who gets freedom, all that stuff can be debated, but that's a truth that doesn't exist naturally. It doesn't exist outside of discourse about what freedom is, but it unites the entire clan no matter how much internal conflict exists within that clan.
I think there's another aspect to it here as well, because the totem is still different for every group. Okay, yeah, I agree. Freedom is the referent, let's say, but what's the actual, like, what's the form? What's the figure? What's the symbol? It's like, what's the shape of the symbol? Is it a flag? Like, that seems like a good choice. It's a flag, or an eagle.
Or the rainbow flag, right? It's also the sign of freedom.
It seems like we're going through a painful process of trying to pick a new, like, symbol to represent freedom. That seems to be something that's important to think about anyway.
Does the totem need to have form for it to work? Because I thought that Pills's point here is more that, like, I don't know, maybe in our modern age, it's like an idea can be a totem, even if it doesn't have like a consistent form.
I guess it could be a word.
So we're dealing with abstract concept. If we're like, okay, the freedom is the word of the thing that we all are trying to do. But even in the totemic society, if you say, like, I'm the tribe of the wolf, it doesn't make any particular wolf divine.
Right.
The wolf is just the social glue that unites the clan by a symbol. And this is the one thing for Durkheim that only humans do, that no other groups do. It's the origin of human sociality, is to have not an actual living wolf, because there's wolves wandering around. Okay. We can make rules about wolves, like you can't kill them. I think you can't kill a bald eagle. We still have that rule, right? It's a law.
Definitely.
A Canada goose too.
You can't kill a Canada goose.
Yeah, you can't kill an eagle for sure.
And you can't pick those flowers. Is it the trillium?
Yeah, the trillium in Ontario. But some of those things have to do with, like, the species' threat level, but some of it is symbolic.
It's because they're sacred objects, right?
I have punched a Canada goose in the face because it flew it flew right at my head.
Whoa, Canada geese can be pretty bullying. They're pretty savage. Yeah,
they're scary.
Durkheim's point with the totem symbol is that everyone realizes the symbol is different from the thing, but the realization that the symbol is different from the thing is the event that creates human society. Like, it's a groundbreaking event. That originary distinction that you say, we have an appearance, but then the appearance becomes the thing that hides the secret of all of reality, which is like our totem, our tribe's totem is the wolf. That is a level of abstraction that is only possible in humans. And the thing that creates everything that we call society is making that distinction between the appearance of a physical wolf and then the inference that wolf means us, our clan, as opposed to the other clan.
I only meant it needed, like, a sensible form. I didn't mean like the literal in the world particular referent.
I know, I totally know you meant that, but it also shows, like, we are part of the American clan, despite the fact that we don't live in America.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's true of some European nations too. Like, I don't know if, like, even though there's going to be more, like, granular differences between, like, a British person and and a Canadian and an American, there's still probably a sense. I mean, I even feel like some of the people that I talked to when I was in Europe felt the weight of, like, American culture, right? Like, actually, well, this was in the Netherlands, actually, when I was talking to this Dutch couple, and they said that, like, the way that it kind of totally permeates their entire cultural consciousness because all the movies that they watch and all the media that they watch. Actually, that's funny because this guy kind of said it in response to me commenting on how much better I thought that, like, the Dutch urban planning was than in North America, and especially the United States. And he was like, yeah, well, grass is always greener. Because I think, like, for him, it's like he was, it was cool to go to America and see the things, the way things look in movies and seeing them in reality.
It's cool. Yeah, being the sort of enchanted tourist is definitely different than sort of having to live there. But I was thinking even, in the beginning of my myth classes I used to teach, we'd start with a mythological symbol, Europa and the bull, right? Which obviously is sort of connected to the word Europe, but then the European Union like consciously chose that symbol to represent them. So you have Europa riding the bull as a symbol. You can see where this stuff gets into semiotics and later things after Durkheim, but I think it's still relevant, right? Like Europa and the bull is the symbol of the European Union, and its sort of abstract conceptual referent is unity across division, as in national divisions, all the different countries. And that's exactly what Durkheim is trying to think about, what unifies a society. Why doesn't it all just fall apart like a bunch of particles that just move apart when you open the container? Like
Exactly.
What keeps them together? What is this immaterial, psychological bond that each particle is carrying around in its head that continues to draw them back together, or continues to make them act not only in their own interest, but in the interest of everyone else that they perceive to be like them as well, and to share some kind of identity with, or to participate in some kind of collective consciousness with. Like when we're all watching the Olympics together, we're all participating in this shared event, and it sort of is a kind of glue. I don't know. There's a lot of different types of glue, I guess, but that's the problem to think about here.
So maybe this would be a useful place to kind of bring up the sacred and the profane. And he kind of gives a sum up. He says, human beings, Durkheim held, experience life on two planes. One is private, mundane, and utilitarian. The other collective, elevated, and moral. These two planes, Durkheim argued, are often religiously symbolized by a familiar dichotomy between the body and soul, a variation of the profane and sacred. Just as the sacred is protected from the profane, so the moral community is secured against the excessive egoism or utilitarianism. A society whose members were consumed by narrow self-interest and mundane activities would eventually disintegrate. So the glue would be lost, right? The argument here is that as individuals exclusively pursue the profane, they reside within an increasingly contracted private space, sharing less and less in common with one another, and hence their shared way of life becomes thin and unable to generate agreement. Okay, so that's just a quote from the reading. But what this made me think about, so this goes to what Eric was talking about like what's the thing that kind of holds the glue together. And it seems like the suggestion here is like the sacred, or like these big, like, right. So in our case, we were talking about freedom, right? That would be like the sacred thing that nobody questions. But then I kind of started thinking about our episodes about Strauss, and like, doesn't this just say like, isn't Leo Strauss just right then? That it's like, that the truth, that like we need these symbols, right? These like these to hold society together. And he's actually very attentive and consistent with Durkheim in the sense that he's like, if we start showing people that behind those, those symbols there's something maybe fake about them, that only the philosophers could handle this knowledge. And that if you start, pushing the idea that, all these values that we have are actually just noble lies, right? Freedom is just a noble lie. Then he's worried about society disintegrating, just like Durkheim is here. So I don't know. I was curious how you'd react to that parallel.
There is a difference to be made on one quotation that Durkheim says here. It's that there is no such thing as a false religion. So if you recall when he's writing, this is early 20th century, late 19th century. And it's a common view that religion is just delusion. Religion is a false belief meant to make people do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And Durkheim points to, underneath all of this, like if you didn't have these beliefs, there would be no society. This is the thing that makes society a society that doesn't disintegrate. And so long as society doesn't disintegrate, which almost never happens. You have civil wars, you have social breakdown, but never does an entire group of people that identifies in the symbolic sphere does it just suddenly become a random group of individuals? That I don't think that's ever happened. It probably can't happen. I mean, I guess they could die, but you don't really see a group suddenly become individuals ever. But that's not to say that a society is based around like agreement in everything. It's a just agreement on one thing. Like I said before, a pariah is a necessary role in society. A critic, a person who says, you know, I hate capitalism. You still live the capitalist life, despite the fact that you hate capitalism. So it's these tiny rituals, not even grand scale, like you go and take the Eucharist type of rituals, but the little rituals that you do every day. This is what binds you to even the people that you disagree with. So it's impossible to disintegrate a society on those grounds, I'd think, so long as you do have shared ritual.
I think it also depends on, you know, if you're an intellectually conservative, which I count Strauss as, and I think I would put Durkheim into being a kind of intellectually conservative thinker as well, then you're going to look to tradition for the source of that unity. And it's just like today's sort of Republican mindset, right? Like the source of freedom is the traditional values and institutions that have served us so well for so long. And, you know, if those are the stable basis on which our freedom is built, as opposed to a progressive outlook, right? Like who do they attack? Who do the Republicans attack? You know, what's this? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Like diversity is our strength. Our unity comes from all of our individual differences being put together and working together, and we can overcome them and be inclusive, blah, blah, blah. You know, so, you know, even if we are all unified around the idea of, say, whatever, liberty, it still breaks down differently. And then you can have different discernible groups underneath that sort of super symbol, that super concept. Then there'll be a lot of different distinctions depending on what like sort of subgroup you're a part of. So I think for someone like Strauss, yeah, whatever, intellectually conservative. For someone else, yeah, you look for a different source of you still buy into the same overarching abstract concept, but you know, I think Durkheim initially is sort of looking at this when he's thinking about the division of labor, right? Because society becomes so complex. We have so many connections to one another now and to different things, and we depend on people that we don't even have daily face-to-face relationships with, yet we still depend on those people for our own functioning and livelihood, right? And it becomes a kind of, you know, almost that complexity and that fragmentation almost becomes, in a weird kind of dialectical reversal, it becomes what actually holds us all together, that interdependence.
The interdependence also depends on the thing that you disagree with. So even if we're criticizing the right for being right, the right for being the right that they are, we still agree on the fundamental definitions.
Yeah.
That for Durkheim, he has a word for this or a term for this. It says, like, no matter if you're left or right or whatever, we all believe in the cult of the individual. And this view for him is a religious belief that society is a bunch of individuals that are sort of added up and they have to sort of figure out how to work with each other. That is the state of modernity, that is secularization, is that everyone starts as an individual and then you come and join as a group. There's nothing distinct between saying, okay, everyone starts as an individual, and saying we are the tribe that is unified by a rock that has a wolf carved into it. These are equally religious statements. So classical liberalism is no less religious than the tribe that says you cannot touch that rock, because individual liberty, as being the most important thing, is the thing that can never be touched. It can never be seriously questioned. And we can say it can be rhetorically questioned, because I think I think it is. But you believe in it even if you don't believe in it. That's what makes a religion a religion. And so many ceremonies and speaking the appropriate way, condemning Hamas before you say why Israel's doing something wrong. Religion begins with these sorts of delineations. And regardless of whether you think you're not religious, we all act them out.
Yeah, I mean, the parallel that I was more thinking about with Strauss was just like the danger of a teaching. Like, so the reason he thought Nietzsche was dangerous, right, is because he does kind of have a narrative of like falsity in a way of society, right? That is, and that like somehow there's a danger to perpetuating that could have a destabilizing effect somehow. But I don't know. I mean,
I see what you're saying there. And I think the difference here is Strauss is like, if we don't keep this up, then everything will fall apart. Whereas Durkheim's position is like, no matter what you try to do to this structure,
it's going to stay.
This is the structure of your mind itself.
Right.
There's nothing you can do to undo society.
Yeah, like there wouldn't be society.
That does strike me as more plausible than like, which the Straussian view, I think, puts way too much importance on ideas, right? Like that like, that we can be convinced of these dangerous ideas that'll, corrupt our minds.
I think I get your point. Like there's different ways of thinking about this. Like if you're a politician and, you're worried that there's too much, disunity within your society, that you feel like things are falling apart, Western civilization is collapsing, like all that stuff, you can start to say those things, and then you can proffer a external enemy that will unite us all together towards some external enemy, like kind of like, what's that guy's name? Carl Schmitt's sort of insights there, right? Like if you have an external enemy, then, you can promote a kind of social unity, internal unity. And if you want to tear a society apart, then, start, coming up with conspiracies about internal enemies and the enemies within. There's ways you can game these things, but then Pills, I think, is right as well. This is also just the way society works. Like you can't at a I don't know, an ontological level. I don't know.
Despite all appearances, you are unable to tear society apart.
It's way harder than people think.
It's literally impossible. It's literally what you are is society.
Right.
The equivalent to being able to overthrow society or overthrow a social system would be like saying you're going to overthrow language. It's impossible. It's impossible to even think that it's possible. And that's what he says. Like every god that is just a mirror of what they think society is. So when you feel like God's comforting you, you're comforting yourself by the fact that you're a part of the group.
And that's kind of why Durkheim says, the people actually participating in that society are going to have trouble understanding these things. Like, I don't know, the fish doesn't know water until it meets air kind of thing. Like, you have to be the sort of, this is something that probably gets criticized. You have to be the sociologist. You have to be outside of it. You have to be the objective observer. And then from your safe distance, from your objective critical distance, you can then see what makes the participants sort of tick and do what they do, and what makes things hang together and what threatens to take them apart. So Durkheim's like, that's the sociological gaze here is always from the outside in. It's like, the best way to understand any religion is not to be a believer in that religion, because then you're sort of clouded, right? You're partisan, you're part of it. You're not going to see the other side.
Yeah, I wonder how much consistency this has with like a kind of account that Rancière has about like, that even if you try to you can maybe interrupt something for a moment, but then it's just going to reconfigure into something that's just slightly different. I don't know if it obviously Durkheim, as far as I know, doesn't have the same kind of account of these, interruptions, but I always took the important lesson of Rancière to be, we can't accept things to just kind of end, right? That it's like, maybe there'll be a moment, but then it's like, it's just going to be something else that's basically the same that takes over. You can't be fully outside of it ever, really.
I think that the grand theoretical interruption, I would call it, maybe, that drives what Durkheim is thinking about is the transition from like a traditional to a modern society. Like, we still do have to posit some kind of break, some kind of disintegrations, or some kind of point at which, whatever, French Revolution, I don't know, pick your event or your sort of rupture. And before that is like primitive, and after that is modern society. And so we worry about, disunity. We worry that, what are these political economists saying? We're all just atomistic individuals. If we all just act in our own self-interest, things will be sort of all right, and the invisible hand will sort of guide things. No, that's not good enough. Okay, we need to look for something that holds it all together. Okay, then Durkheim's answer is to sort of think about the religious character of society and the social character of religion. And whatever individual iterations, whatever divergences, whatever unique guises it appears in, we now know what is actually the essential thing underneath it all, which is those totemic symbols, totemism.
The output of this is to say, like, there's no fundamental difference in kind between the tribe of the wolf and then modern classical liberalism, or modern, what we call modern democracy. We have our wolf is just a bunch of terms. It's individual liberty, which is the one we've mentioned, but also things like equality. And equality is another one that we have, that you cannot doubt it, or you cannot question it. Actually, that's not true. You have freedom of speech, that you can say things to the effect of, not all people are equal, but it's written into law that you cannot act that out without becoming either a criminal or becoming an antisocial in some way. And this is one more important thing that is necessary. The person who is cast out, the person who is designated as an antisocial, the person who is considered mad, they are also necessary to the ongoing functioning of society, because they kind of stand there as an edge case of what could happen to you. But they are still not outside of society despite being antisocial. Just name drop the Foucault here. Like, we have asylums. Asylums are non-social, but within society still.
Yeah, the subcultures, I guess, can sort of be built around, you can have whatever prison system, criminal subcultures, or like, history of sexuality. You can have like, I guess, sexual orientation, or subcultures, or transgender subcultures and things. And then other groups will look at those groups with disdain, and these are elements of the social structure. They're not things, they're not like ticking time bombs that are going to blow everything apart. They're just part of the structure.
Yeah, it's kind of a totalizing view to say there is no outside of society. You can't write from outside of society. You can't analyze from outside of society. There's no like external view. And even the things that people believe are others or antagonists or antisocials, they do have a place in the structure. I did want to get to one thing as we come up on time here, because he does some philosophy. He says, I can fix the break between empiricism and Kantianism, which is a pretty radical claim. Let's see. So empiricism has the problem of we just experience stuff and then we kind of turn it into a story after. But it can't answer the question, why do we tend to turn it into the same story? Why are we taught this story and it seems to work despite the fact that we're all machines that have sense, basically? And then on the other side, you have Kant, and Kant says, no, this is a priori. Like, this is built somehow into the human mind. Not that he knew anything about neuroscience or anything like that, but just no, we have things that you can get to and get no further than that. And Durkheim says we can actually solve this problem. The reason that we have time is because we have certain times, like days, festivals, events like this, that mark sacred time as opposed to mundane time. Profane doesn't mean, by the way, profane doesn't mean like evil or bad or corrupt. It just means the everyday.
Yeah.
So as soon as you invent special time, then for the first time in natural history, you have broken whatever time was before this event. By saying that there are special events, holy days, festival days, you have broken continuity. And only by this radical event of first breaking continuity can you have events at all. That's the only way you can imagine time, as if from outside, as if it's a flow of events. And after that, obviously, we can break up time more into hours, minutes, seconds, moments, and then suddenly you experience time as a sequence. So this is not a priori, it's a consequence of religion. And the same thing is with space. If you have, I guess you'd call like a primitive, a proto-human conscious, there wouldn't be anything different about this space compared to that space, like the way animals experience space, for example, or most animals. Like they don't have like, oh, here's the barrier, unless you give them a barrier and you tell your dog you can't go over that. But all space would be undistinguished, or there would be no difference of this space to that space. And he says, this is one of Kant's a priori categories. And Durkheim says, no, like you can't do that unless you divide space up. And what is the first thing to divide space up? Well, it's religion, and say, here's a special space. This is the inside of the temple. This is where only certain people can go on certain days, and the rest of you cannot. So, I don't think we can prove or argue this either way. But when it comes to saying that like humans are social animals, this is the same thing as to say that humans are religious animals, and that there is no distinction about the things that we consider most intimate, like time and space. There's no distinction to be made except for the original distinction, which is sacred from profane. So this is a philosophical claim. This is like a claim that any consciousness is a sort of religious consciousness based on the original distinction. And we can't really be sure, right? We don't have the anthropological record to know when the first distinction was made. Or was the first distinction made in language? Or did it precede language? And most interestingly, did religion, this kind of ritual gift giving, is this the thing that caused language? Were proto-humans giving each other gifts before they could even speak to each other? And this meant that you had to invent a language to facilitate the giving of gifts. So we get into so many interesting questions here. If we do a critique, it's not going to be today. But if we understand sociality to be agreement at base, underpinning everything is a fundamental faith in the world based on distinctions that everyone accepts, disregarding politics, disregarding all the differences that are demonstrable and that seem to occupy so much of our time. But there is like a faith community that exists prior to all that we can never even imagine thinking outside of.
Yeah. In other words, these are sort of speculative or plausible narratives. Like Durkheim's giving us a sort of plausible narrative to account for social evolution. And that's that main distinction you brought up. Yeah, the sacred and the profane, the religious and the secular, whatever that distinction. And then all the other distinctions that kind of orbit around that one, like down here and up there, transcendence and immanence and all that. They create these, that's what creates the broader structure, I think, because it's binary. I guess I'm anticipating a little bit structuralism, but I think Durkheim's already kind of in there. He's like a proto-structuralist. And so his central binary is that. So they're built on distinctions that are sort of opposites in unity, right? Like when Levi Strauss talks about the same sorts of things, with, say, in an anthropological context, he looks at like those tattoos. You have these lines that go vertically and you have these tattoos with lines that go horizontally. And he sort of interprets that to say, well, they're in the society driven by these conflicts between, these sort of social vertical hierarchies and these horizontal egalitarian or horizontal relationships, right? So, for instance, having a leader that's above you, or having to sort of, marry into a different, like horizontally into a different tribe, for instance, or a different clan within your phylum. And these symbols, these tattooy symbols, are kind of like symbolic resolutions of these otherwise irreconcilable conflicts that we encounter within a society. And again, that comes back to the sort of totem, right? The totem is a symbolic resolution of conflicting binary opposites that are also somehow held in unity and provide the glue that also sort of holds everything together.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I think, there's a part of me that always kind of wants to resist this move to sort of flatten definitions, just be like, oh, everything's religion, right? Like, and the reason I get suspicious of that stuff is because I think that there can be value in distinctions, right? Like that like there's got to be a way of saying, well, this is different from that, right? And like, how are these two different things? And there can be sometimes in like this, I don't know, high theory, this like attempt to sort of be like, well, there's actually, and I feel like there's even a meme of like Jordan Peterson, all those clips where he's like, they're literally the same thing, like going through all these different like binary. And I'm not saying that at all. What we're doing is the same as what Jordan Peterson's doing.
The coiling snakes are DNA.
Yeah, exactly. So like I would just throw in like that I just generally have like a bit of a skepticism of that move, but I see what he's trying to do at a more that like there's somehow that there's like that this, desire for, or this, I don't know, orientation towards unity with others, sociality is like, that religion is somehow, an outgrowth of that it's like almost like what we maybe think about as religion, what like an atheist might think of as religion is just like another species of this like desire that we all have, or this way that our mind structures things, right? And it's not like, and that doesn't mean that like they're all the same, like, from the perspective of value, but that they're, that there's something at the core that causes, right? That's if that makes sense.
That makes me think of like conspiracy theory thinking again. It's
Yeah,
like, you go to some ancient ruins and you see an Ouroboros and you're like, aha, they had discovered DNA a long time ago. Or like, look at these pyramids, aliens must have come and built them. Like it lends itself to that kind of thinking too.
It does. Well, but then also I like the part in the reading when he makes the distinction between magic and religion, right? That like magic is just a thing that like is self-serving, right? That like the difference between magic and religion is that like magic is not playing a social role, right? That it's like, which is where you can kind of see these hucksters, right? Who are, trying to sell you, I don't know, fucking those big arena Christian preachers, right? Who are like, oftentimes maybe they're just doing it that claim they can heal you, right? It's like there might be like a way in which that's playing a social role, but there's also like you can also maybe accuse that as being magic because it's like self-serving, that one guy, right? Or serving the person who thinks that they can be healed, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to push back against, not everything is religion, but the primary human distinction from which all other distinctions arise, and some of them are no longer religious and some of them are. The primary one that makes you human in the first place is religious. And then after that, we have to deal with these things, like you said. We have to deal with magic. Magic is not a communal practice. It's a selfish practice. You can think of technology basically is magic. It belongs to that.
We wouldn't have science without earlier magical thinking, evolutionary.
The way that we discuss or the way that we practice technology, this does have a social element that reinscribes religion into the process. But we do come to a problem here, and this is a problem with any systems theory, because this is at bottom a systems theory, but there is no explanation. So let's put it this way. We have Hobbes, and Hobbes says, okay, we're all in a state of nature, and then suddenly, sort of inexplicably, we decide that we can benefit more as a group if we have this originary social bond, and we don't trust each other, but we can trust each other's self-interest. So this is his origin story of society. Durkheim's origin story of society is there's a bunch of individual humans that are basically animals in their behavior. They're solitary, maybe family groups.
Biologically driven.
Biologically needs-based. But then they get around a fire for some reason at the same time. And this experience of being around a fire all of a sudden, then they see something and they unify around that new thing that they saw. So
there's a sort of feeling there too. He calls effervescence.
They feel a unity just by being together, and then they see a wolf and they go, okay, the wolf is the thing that brought us unity. So this is also a mythological origin story. It's much more social than Hobbes, who's very individualistic, atomistic. But to say, okay, here's the origin of society. It's humans sitting around a fire and then identifying with a symbol. That's the first thing that a human does to make them a human, as opposed to a primate. And again, we don't there's no anthropological evidence for this, and it's very weird because we can't get back to that state. We can never exit our current state, and our current state is the social state. But we can't ever know why that originary event happened. Was it completely by accident? Why did the first person who made a distinction between the sacred and the profane do that? Like, what was the cause?
It's like lost in the mists of time.
Well, even more than being lost in the mists of time, we can't conceptualize it, because our conceptualization would be overwritten by the event already having taken place. And we have a similar problem with every grand explanation, like historical materialism. Why was there suddenly a distinction between your property and public property? Why did that arise?
Or like raw and cooked.
Or even just go down to the basic building blocks of like, why did life suddenly become life and self-reproduce? What was the accident that made that happen? So this is one of those categories of thing. We can't ever have an explanation for why the first thing happened. Why was the first word spoken? When did the first word become a word when there wasn't a system of words for it to fit into?
Yeah, when things didn't have meaning, and then suddenly the next day suddenly everything has meaning, and you can refer to them with words.
So it's, in that sense, it's inexplicable. There's just a sudden shift when everything that we care about happens after, and nothing that we cared about happened before. So in that sense, there's still no resolution here. But it does give us a different sense of, really nothing's worth panicking about because we've made it this far.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, or it's sort of, but like the attempt to explain it, is sort of arbitrary. Like the Durkheim's choice of religion as containing everything that follows is sort of arbitrary. Because like you said, or even just, I say, the primary distinction is between raw and cooked. Well, what about before fire was discovered? You go up to someone and say, this is raw. They'd be like, what? What are you talking? Like, as opposed to what? Like, but no, that distinction contains everything. What are you talking about? Well, how would it come along? Like, sort of the question is like, what was Durkheim sort of not seeing? How is Durkheim a sort of product of his time? You know, he says in 1899, he writes, religion contains in itself from the very beginning all the elements which have given rise to the various manifestations of collective life. From myths and legends have issued forth science and poetry. From religious ornamentations and cult ceremonials have come the plastic arts. From ritual practice were born laws and morals, and one cannot understand our perception of the world, of life, if one does not know the religious beliefs which are their primordial forms. So end quote. So he really puts religion, but it's kind of an arbitrary choice. Like, you know, why not choose something else other than religion? Well, I don't know. There's where the criticism should begin.
The question is, when does the human animal, the Homo sapien, become us? Become what we think?
I mean, it's kind of unknowable.
You can't look back using the tools that are produced by the process to analyze what precedes the process. It's a black box.
When does a couple rocks become a pile, or when does two people become a crowd? 3 people, 4 people? Is that a crowd? Yeah. Where's that point?
Anyway, I really do have to go. I'm meeting someone and they got to the location a bit early. So
when does Victor have to leave? Like, what is the point? 2 more seconds? Can he stay for 10 more seconds?
I could stay for.
Can he
I could stay for 2 more. I could stay for 2 more minutes.
Like, what is the dividing line between Victor can stay and now he has to go? Those are such questions and more next time.
Next time.
And again, at the end of another episode, we say, what have we accomplished? You know, kind of nothing, but reframing the terms of the current debates in a much wider schema. This felt like, coming off a good mushroom trip where you're like, everything's the same, man. So I'm sure I'll turn back on it later, but it was a welcome deviation.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it.
And part of the lesson here is that when you're in a system, when you're in a part of the thing, the distinctions that you're working with seem like real distinctions, but in fact, they might not be. They might be completely contingent, ultimately arbitrary, and simulated.
Whoa,
man! All right,
far out.
That seems like a good place to wrap her up.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to look forward to? We got other readings.
There's other readings. I'm also teaching a class in September that I have to start preparing for, and I was going to see if there's a way for me to shoehorn in something from that class, that syllabus I'm designing.
Hey,
kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Good.
So I'll see if I have anything that would be of interest.
Yeah, fuck those birds, kill them all.
Yeah.
There's psychoanalytic explanations for this too, like maybe dreams. Humans started randomly dreaming, and this was like the outside that changed the internal behavior of society. So really, it's can we find the original accident? We lived in a universe without meaning, and then suddenly it became meaningful. And a lot of these different philosophers and the original sociologists are looking for where that break is, and this is just one possible explanation for that.
Good.
That's good.
All right, why don't we cut it there?
Sounds good. All right.
I love it.
You know where the rest of it is? It's on the Patreon.
Yes. Become a pill popper.
It's worth paying for, you know?
It is. Definitely give us money. Give us your money, please.
I will drink so much more coffee if you buy me them.
Coffee or beer? Yeah, we'll bring back a drunk Eric for episodes if he can afford it, he can pay for his beer before the episode.
Yeah, you're going to have to get Eric to peak form so that he can defend Marxist sociology against symbolic sociology.
Yeah.
This bourgeois garbage is...
All right.
Bye.
Later.